My name is Clara, and I'm a wildlife photographer, 38 years old, with a heart that's always chased the untamed edges of the world. For years I've crouched in the dense jungles of Borneo, perched on crumbling cliffs in Patagonia, and waded through the murky swamps of the Everglades. My camera a faithful companion, a lens between me and the raw pulse of nature. I grew up in Chicago, where the city's concrete and clamor were my cradle, the wind off Lake Michigan, the closest thing to wild I knew as a child. The urban sprawl, with its honking horns, neon lights, and restless crowds, shaped me into someone who craved escape, who found solace in places where humanity's footprint was faint. So when a nature magazine offered me a contract to photograph the caribou migration across Alaska's Noatak River Valley, I didn't hesitate. It was a chance to capture something pure, something untouched, a world apart from the city I'd left behind. The Noatak Valley was a revelation, a landscape so vast it seemed to swallow time itself. Golden grasses pierced through patches of snow, swaying in the wind like a sea caught mid-breath. The river carved a silver path through the valley, its waters glinting under a sky that stretched too wide, too heavy, as if it might collapse under its own weight. In the distance, the bared mountains stood like ancient guardians, their peaks dusted with frost, their silence a challenge to anyone who dared intrude. I set up camp on a low rise near the river, my tent a solitary speck against the endless expanse. The air was sharp, carrying the scent of frozen earth and a faint metallic tang that lingered in my throat, unfamiliar and unsettling. Compared to Chicago's smog, its diesel fumes and overheated asphalt, this place was a cathedral of stillness, but it wasn't serene. The silence was alive, pressing against my ears, making every rustle of my jacket, every creak of my boots, feel like an intrusion. I'd been there 4 days, my camera a constant weight around my neck, its lens trained on the caribou that moved like ghosts through the valley. I was alone, my only company, the distant cry of an eagle or the soft gurgle of the river. I'd grown used to solitude, but this felt different, heavier, as if the land itself was watching, waiting. On the 4th evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples and golds, I crouched near the riverbank, tracking a lone caribou through my viewfinder. Its antlers caught the fading light, a silhouette of grace against the snow. The world was so still, I could hear my own pulse, a steady rhythm in the quiet. Then from the direction of the river came a sound, a low harmonic hum, like a choir singing in a tongue I couldn't decipher. It wasn't the wind, which I'd learned to recognize by its uneven wail, nor was it an animal, not any I'd ever heard. The hum rose and fell, deliberate, almost melodic, weaving through the air like a thread pulled taut. My skin prickled, and I lowered my camera, my breath fogging in the cold, my eyes scanning the horizon for something, anything to explain it. But there was nothing, just the snow, the grass, and the river's glinting surface. I told myself it was a trick of the valley, sound bouncing off the mountains, distorted by the wind. But my hands trembled as I packed my gear, my fingers clumsy in their gloves, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see a figure in the distance. That night, in my tent, the hum returned, louder, closer, seeping through the nylon walls like water through a sieve. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It felt alive, pressing against my chest, filling the air with a weight that made my lungs ache. I lay there, my sleeping bag pulled tight, listening as the hum shaped itself into voices, not one but many, overlapping in a chorus that seemed to whisper my name. The words, if they were words, were foreign, guttural, yet they carried an intimacy that made my heart race. I didn't sleep, not really, just drifted in a haze, the voices threading through my dreams, pulling at memories I hadn't touched in years. My mother's voice, sharp with worry, my brother's laugh cut short by a car accident a decade ago. The next morning, I radioed base camp, 30 miles away, where my guide Isaac was stationed with 2 researchers, Karen and Dev. My voice cracked over the line as I described the sound, the hum that wasn't wind, wasn't anything I could name. Isaac, a local with a voice weathered by years in the wild, paused before responding. "Stay where you are, Clara," he said, his tone careful, like he was measuring his words. "Could be the river playing tricks. I'll come out tomorrow." Karen, a botanist with a no-nonsense edge, cut in. "You're probably just hearing the wind through the grass. It gets weird out there, especially if you're not used to it." Dev, the team's meteorologist, chuckled, but it was thin, forced. "Don't let the quiet spook you, city girl. You'll adjust." I wanted to believe them, to chalk it up to fatigue or isolation, but the metallic taste in the air was stronger now, coating my tongue, and the valley felt less like a cathedral and more like a grave. Isaac arrived the next day, his snowmobile cutting a jagged path through the snow. He was older, maybe 50, with deep-set eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the land itself. We hiked to the riverbank together, the hum absent now, the valley silent except for the crunch of our boots and the faint rush of the river. I pointed to the spot where I'd seen the caribou, where the hum had first emerged. Isaac knelt, his gloved hands brushing the snow, and his face tightened. "Look at this," he said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. There, in the snow, were tracks, not caribou, not human, but something else, a series of shallow, irregular impressions, forming a loose circle around where I'd stood. They weren't deep, but they were deliberate, like something had paced around me, unseen, while I'd been lost in my lens. I stared, my breath catching, the metallic taste sharp in my mouth. "Could be a bear," I said, though the words felt hollow. Isaac shook his head, his eyes fixed on the tracks. "Bears don't move like that. Too neat, too intentional." We followed the tracks, which led toward the river and then stopped, as if whatever made them had stepped into the water and vanished. The hum started again as we stood there, faint at first, then swelling until it filled the air, a chorus of voices that seemed to rise from the river itself. Isaac's face paled, and he grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "We need to go, Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but I couldn't move, not yet. The water was clear, impossibly so, and beneath its surface, I saw shapes, flickering, human-like forms that moved in time with the voices, their outlines blurred but unmistakable. They weren't reflections. There was nothing above the water to cast them. Their limbs were too long, their movements too fluid, like shadows dancing in a dream. We argued then, our voices sharp against the hum. Isaac wanted to head back to base camp, to get Karen and Dev and leave the valley for good. "This isn't right," he said, his eyes darting to the river, where the shapes seemed to grow clearer, their forms pressing against the surface like hands against glass. "I've heard stories, Clara, old ones, about the river keeping voices, trapping them. I wanted to stay, to understand, to capture it on film. My photographer's instinct screamed at me to document it, to prove it was real." "We need evidence," I said, my camera already in my hands, my fingers trembling as I adjusted the lens. "No one will believe us otherwise." Isaac shook his head, his voice rising. "You don't get it. This isn't something you photograph. It's something you survive." But the hum was louder now, and the shapes in the water were turning toward us, their featureless faces somehow watching, waiting. Back at my tent, the hum didn't stop. It grew, swelling into a roar, a chorus of voices that seemed to come from the ground, the air, the river itself. I recorded it, my hands shaking as I held the device, the battery draining faster than it should have. The voices were calling now, not just my name, but Isaac's, Karen's, Dev's, and others, names I didn't know, names that felt ancient, woven into a song that was both beautiful and terrifying. I played the recording for Isaac, who listened in silence, his face grim, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the tent. "That's not just sound," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "That's them, the ones who didn't leave." I wanted to argue, to find a rational explanation, but the metallic taste was choking now, and my head throbbed with the weight of the voices, each one pulling at a different memory, a different fear. My mother's voice, sharp with warning, my brother's laugh, cut short, my own doubts, whispering that I'd never been good enough. We stayed up, arguing about what to do. Isaac wanted to burn the tent, to leave no trace of our presence, as if that would appease whatever was out there. "We disturbed something," he said, his hands clenched into fists. "We need to make it right." I refused, clinging to the idea that we could study it, that we could understand it. What if it's a discovery? I asked, my voice desperate. What if it's something no one's ever seen? But Isaac just looked at me, his eyes heavy with something like pity. You think you're the first to hear it. You think you're the first to try. Karen and Dev, when we radioed them, were skeptical but rattled. Karen suggested it was a natural phenomenon, maybe infrasound from the river's flow. Dev, quieter now, said he'd check weather data for anomalies. But their voices were distant, and the hum was here, now, filling the tent, the valley, my skull. That night, the hum became a scream, a sound that tore through my mind and made my vision blur. The river surged, though there was no rain, no melt, its waters rising until they lapped at the edge of my tent. The shapes beneath the surface clearer now, dozens of them, their forms humanoid but wrong, their limbs too long, their faces featureless yet staring. Isaac shouted, his voice lost in the roar, and I saw him grab a flare, its red light cutting through the darkness. The shapes recoiled, but only for a moment, and then they were back, pressing closer, their voices a cacophony that drowned out everything else. I dropped my camera, the lens cracking against a rock, and stumbled toward the snowmobile. Isaac was behind me, his breath ragged, his hands shaking as he started the engine. We rode out, the hum chasing us, the voices screaming until we crested a hill and the valley fell away, the sound fading like a tide receding. I'm back in Chicago now. The city's noise a lifeline I cling to. I quit the magazine, sold most of my gear, but I kept the recorder. Sometimes, when the city quiets, I play it, the hum faint but unmistakable. The voice is still there, calling my name, calling others. I see the river in my dreams, the shapes moving beneath it, their hands reaching up, their faces watching. Isaac won't speak to me. He said the valley doesn't let go, that we left something behind or brought something back. The metallic taste lingers, faint but persistent, and sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear the choir again, singing from a place I can't name. I wonder what we woke in that valley, what we left unfinished. The river keeps its secrets, but it hasn't forgotten me, and I fear I'll hear its song until the day I die. I never imagined I'd end up in Alaska, trading the familiar chaos of city life for a frozen exile that promised to rewrite my future. Back in Seattle, my days were a grind of unfulfilling office jobs, endless commutes through rain-slicked streets, and nights spent staring at a ceiling cracked with regret. At 25, I was drowning in debt. Student loans from a degree that led nowhere, credit cards maxed out on attempts to keep up appearances in a world that felt increasingly hollow. The allure of the North Slope oil fields hit me like a lifeline during a late-night scroll through job postings. Six-figure salaries for pipeline maintenance, the kind of money that could erase my burdens and let me start fresh, maybe even buy that cabin in the woods I daydreamed about as a kid. But it wasn't just the pay, it was the escape, the chance to test myself against something raw and real, to shed the skin of my old self in a land where survival demanded everything you had. I packed up, said goodbye to friends who called me crazy, and flew north, trading the hum of traffic for the roar of Arctic winds. Alaska welcomed me with its breathtaking, terrifying beauty, the vast tundra unfolding like an infinite white canvas under skies that bled with the northern lights, mountains rising like silent guardians cloaked in eternal snow, and rivers frozen into glassy veins that snaked through forests of spruce standing sentinel in the hush. There was a peace in that isolation, a stillness so profound it felt almost sacred, where the only sounds were the crunch of boots on permafrost and the distant howl of winds that carried echoes of ancient solitude. It contrasted sharply with Seattle's constant buzz, the blaring horns, crowded sidewalks, artificial lights that never let the night fully descend. Here, the darkness lasted months, wrapping you in a cocoon of introspection, forcing you to confront who you were without distractions. But that beauty came with a price, the cold that clawed at your bones, blizzards that erased the world in white, and an isolation so complete that a single mistake could mean death, miles from help. I joined a crew that became my surrogate family. Brad, the sturdy Texan with a booming laugh and stories from his ranch days, always the one to crack a beer after a shift and remind us why we endured, and Tommy, the eager Minnesotan, barely out of his teens, whose jokes hid a homesickness I recognized all too well. We'd bonded over shared hardships, repairing pipes fractured by relentless freeze-thaw cycles, battling equipment failures that could explode in an instant, and huddling in prefab shelters during storms that turned the Dalton Highway into a treacherous ice ribbon. In February 2018, after a brutal week patching stress cracks in the line near Prudhoe Bay, we were bunked in one of those modular units 40 miles south of Deadhorse, the company's stark metal oasis, equipped with bunks, a kitchenette, and radios that often failed when you needed them most. Our drive back in Brad's rugged Ford F-350, tires chained for grip, heater blasting against the encroaching blizzard, felt like just another chapter in our ongoing saga. Tommy dozing in the back, me riding shotgun with a thermos of bitter coffee, trading tales with Brad about what we'd do with our next paycheck, the swirling snow outside a mesmerizing veil that lulled us into a false sense of normalcy. The first hint of wrongness slipped in so quietly, it almost felt like an extension of the storm's whimsy, a trick of the light, or the mind weary from endless white. We were about 2 hours deep into the drive, the headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the blizzard's frenzy. Visibility shrunk to a ghostly 30 feet, where snowflakes danced like frenzied spirits in the beams. The wind wailed outside, a low moan that seeped through the cab's seals, mingling with the heater's steady hum and Tommy's soft snores. I was midway through a sip of coffee, the lukewarm liquid grounding me, when Brad's foot slammed the brakes, the truck shuddering to a halt with a jolt that threw Tommy forward. "What in God's name?" Brad breathed, his voice a mix of confusion and alarm, leaning forward to peer through the frost-rimmed windshield. There, emerging from the white void like a phantom materializing from mist, was a solitary figure stumbling along the road's edge. No wrecked vehicle loomed nearby, no emergency flares piercing the gloom, just this lone shape in a bulky parka, pressing forward against the gale. At first glance, it could have been anyone caught in the weather, a trucker whose rig had failed, or a wanderer lost in the freeze. But as we sat there, engine idling, the details gnawed at me. His gait wasn't the desperate, erratic stagger of hypothermia's grip, where limbs flail for warmth and balance. It was rhythmic, almost programmed, one foot planting deliberately after the other, arms hanging limp like forgotten appendages. The parka, an olive-green military surplus with fur-trimmed hood whipping in the wind, seemed out of place, too pristine against the storm's assault. Brad honked twice, the blare sharp but quickly devoured by the howling air, yet the figure didn't react, no head turn, no wave for help, just that inexorable forward motion. My heart quickened, a subtle unease blooming in my chest like frost on glass. Was this real? The isolation up here played tricks, shadows in the snow mimicking shapes, the endless white inducing hallucinations after long shifts. Maybe it's just the light, I muttered to myself, rubbing my eyes, but the figure persisted, solid and undeniable. Tommy stirred, grumbling, "What the hell was that stop for?" before spotting it too. We exchanged glances, the cab suddenly feeling smaller, the warmth artificial against the chill seeping in. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a mirage born of fatigue, but instinct whispered otherwise. Something about that mechanical stride felt profoundly off, like we'd intruded on a scene not meant for human eyes. "We gotta check," Brad said finally, his tone resolute, but laced with the same doubt I felt, as if voicing it might dispel the illusion. From there, the tension uncoiled slowly at first, like a spring tightening under pressure, each new revelation layering dread upon dread, until the air in the cab felt thick with it. We didn't hesitate long. Leaving someone in 40 below was unthinkable, a betrayal of the unspoken code that bound us workers in this forsaken land. Brad threw the truck in park, and we piled out, the wind assaulting us like a barrage of icy needles, piercing every zipper and seam in our gear. "Hey, you okay? Need help?" Tommy shouted, his voice fraying at the edges as it battled the storm. No answer. We trudged forward through knee-deep snow, boots sinking with each step, our breaths pluming in white clouds that froze mid-air. As we closed in, within 10 feet now, Brad reached out, grasping the man's shoulder to spin him around. The face that confronted us halted us like a physical blow, skin pallid as fresh-fallen snow, unnaturally smooth without the telltale blotches of frostbite, eyes a murky gray like sludge-choked ice, gazing not at us but through us, fixed on some invisible horizon. A ragged scar traced from left temple to jaw, stark against the whiteness, with 3 days' stubble shadowing it like a dark omen. But it was the lips ceaselessly moving, shaping silent words that the wind stole away, that sent a deeper shiver through me than the cold ever could. What What is he saying? Tommy whispered, his eyes wide, stepping back instinctively. Brad, ever the pragmatist, waved a gloved hand before the man's face. Sir, can you hear us? You hurt? No blink, no acknowledgement, just that swaying stance, lips persisting in their mute chant. I leaned closer, heart hammering against my ribs, every fiber urging retreat, and strained against the gale. 247, 247, over and over, a monotonous loop that echoed in my mind like a malfunctioning machine. This can't be real, I thought, my mind racing to rationalize, perhaps delirium from exposure, the isolation driving him mad, as we'd heard in bar tales of men lost to the white. But those eyes, void of life yet piercing, stirred a primal fear, as if we'd unearthed something buried in the tundra's depths. Guys, we gotta get him inside, Brad urged, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying the same unease. Can't just stand here debating. Tommy nodded reluctantly. Yeah, but look at him, no shivering, body should be convulsing by now. We argued briefly in the whipping snow. Tommy wanted to radio ahead, but I pointed out the static we'd get in this weather. Brad insisted ethics demanded action. What if it was one of us? He pressed. Finally, we guided him back, his body rigid as a mannequin, offering no resistance but no aid, limbs cold as the permafrost even through layers. Why is he so damn stiff? Tommy grunted, straining. Feels like hauling a corpse. Back in the cab, Tommy squeezed against the door, eyeing the stranger warily as Brad maxed the heat. Silence descended, punctuated by the fan's blast, and those lips still forming. 247. Minutes stretched. 5, 10, and Tommy broke it. Okay, spill it. Doesn't he look exactly like Vaughn, that missing guy from 16? Brad's grip on the wheel tightened, knuckles blanching. The snowmobiler, scar matches. Brother told me about the boat prop accident over drinks in Dead Horse. I recalled the posters. Christopher Vaughn, vanished in a crash, sled bloodied, drag marks ending abruptly in the woods. But he's dead, 2 years gone, I counted, voice shaky. Eyes were brown in the photos, not this. Tommy leaned forward, then explained the resemblance, and that muttering 247, like coordinates, a code. We debated heatedly, Brad clinging to logic, probably a lookalike, hypothermic hallucination. Tommy shot back, hallucinations don't feel this cold. Touch him, skin like ice, no warmth building. I touched his arm accidentally, recoiling at the unnatural chill. This isn't right, I admitted, doubt cracking my resolve. What if it's him, some frozen echo? Brad scoffed, but his laugh rang hollow. Ghosts, come on, we're oilmen, not storytellers. Yet, as the shelter's lights flickered into view through the white wall, radio spitting static, the man's rasped words shattered the debate. Can't go in, not yet, not until 247. Tommy yelped, banging his head on the frame. What the fuck does that mean? He demanded, panic rising. 247 like AM. Why? Brad and I stared, fear now a tangible force. We hauled him inside anyway, his form collapsing limp at the door, dead weight nearly toppling us. He's out cold, Brad panted, laying him on a bunk. Under fluorescence, horrors multiplied, nails overgrown, curved yellow like talons untouched for months. No odor, just sterile void where sweat and grime should cling. Someone wandering should stink, Tommy observed, voice trembling. Pockets revealed a key fob, leather etched, C. Vaughn 2015. Holy shit, Tommy gasped, mugs crashing. It's him. How? Brad paced, radio dead. Storms locked us in, hours till clear. Power dipped, lights flickering. The man stirred, eyes locking on the clock. 11:30 p.m., lips quickening. 2047. Tommy clutched my arm. We leave now, but outside was oblivion. Can't suicide, Brad argued. Hours dragged. Uneaten food, restless pacing, debates intensifying. If it's Vaughn, how's he alive? I pondered aloud. Frozen, preserved, Tommy whispered, or undead. Those eyes, empty. Brad tried reason, medical anomaly, catatonia. But doubt eroded us. The tundra's hush now a suffocating shroud, its beauty a cruel jest. Exhaustion clawed. We watched in shifts, minds spiraling into paranoia. No one will buy this, Tommy muttered. We'll sound insane. The peak surged like a blizzard's fury, engulfing us in waves of horror that left us gasping. I snapped awake to Tommy's frantic grip. Clock at 2:46 a.m. He's vanished, he choked. Bunk barren. We tore the shelter apart. Every inch, every shadow. Nothing. Hearts pounding. We froze as 3 knocks rapped the door, deliberate and echoing. Terror iced my veins. 2:47. Oh God, Tommy whimpered. Knocks migrated to north window, vibrating glass. South, insistent. back to door, encircling us, a spectral siege that clawed at our sanity. Brad brandished a wrench, breath ragged. Can't be no survival out there. Each knock amplified our despair, the metal resonating like doom's toll. No footprints visible in the slits of light, just endless white, mocking our entrapment. Dawn's grey light offered no solace. The snow outside immaculate, untouched by any mark. But as we dashed for the truck, Tommy dissolved mid-step. No gasp, no trace, just vacant space where he stood. Brad and I gaped, horror paralyzing us before we fled to Fairbanks, reporting him missing, excising Vaughn's spectre from our tail. Troopers recovered him frozen at the crash site, drag marks ceasing inexplicably. What entity did we invite in? A remnant tethered to 247, a timestamp of doom. The tundra's serene vastness now torments me. Its auroral dances a veil for lurking voids. Its silence a patient predator. I've lost more than Tommy. Faith in the rational, the comfort of forgetting. Every blizzard, I eye the clock, pondering if Alaska's beauty is merely anticipation, waiting to reclaim what's wandered too close, whispering that my escape was temporary, the knocks inevitable. What lessons in this frozen hell, that some debts to debt, to ambition, exact souls in the land never forgets. I never imagined I'd end up as a ranger in the wilds of Yukon, where life and death are separated by a single snowstorm. Back in Vancouver, my days were a quiet, predictable rhythm, coding at a desk in a cramped office, sipping overpriced coffee in familiar cafes with the same faces, and wandering flea markets on weekends, hunting for trinkets to fill an apartment that felt more like a storage unit than a home. But at 32, that life started to suffocate me. The relentless glow of computer screens, the endless drone of car horns piercing through rain-soaked streets, the weight of faceless projects that drained my soul without purpose. One late night, bleary-eyed from another deadline, a job posting flickered across my screen, a ranger position in Yukon, offering solitude, a modest salary to sustain a simpler life, and the chance to reconnect with a nature I'd only seen in documentaries. The idea of trading urban haze for untamed wilderness tugged at something deep inside, a call to test my limits against something raw and unyielding. I packed a duffel bag with essentials, said goodbye to skeptical friends who called me reckless, and flew north, exchanging the hum of traffic for the eerie howl of wind threading through endless pine forests. Yukon greeted me with a raw, almost overwhelming majesty. The landscape stretched out like a dream, vast expanses of snow-draped taiga shimmering under a sky streaked with dancing auroras, mountains rising like ancient sentinels, cloaked in eternal snow, and rivers carved into the earth, their surfaces frozen into glassy scars that snake through dense spruce forests, standing silent in the hush. The silence was deafening at first, a void where Vancouver's constant noise once lived, broken only by the sharp crack of branches snapping under snow or the distant mournful cry of a wolf echoing through the trees. I took to my post at a remote cabin near the Klondike River, a sturdy but weathered structure equipped with a wood stove that crackled with life, a radio that hissed with static more often than it connected, and a rifle I hoped I'd never need to fire. My duties were straightforward: monitor wildlife populations, report weather shifts to base in Dawson City, and keep the trails clear of fallen branches or drifted snow. But the isolation carved out a space for reflection I hadn't anticipated, forcing me to confront the man I'd become adrift, restless, seeking purpose in a world that no longer fit me like a glove. The first hint of trouble came in midwinter, January 2025, when a blizzard rolled in with an unnatural fury that seemed to defy the season's norms. I'd been tracking a pack of wolves near a frozen creek a mile from the cabin, their paw prints sharp and deliberate against the pristine snow, when the wind turned vicious, whipping flakes into a blinding, disorienting wall that erased the horizon. My radio crackled with static as I fought my way back, the cold biting through my layers despite the thick parka and gloves, each step a battle against the deepening drifts. Inside the cabin, I stoked the fire to a roaring blaze and waited out the storm, peering through frosted windows at the white chaos outside. Hours dragged on, the wind howling like a living thing, until I saw it, a shadow moving against the storm's fury, deliberate and slow, emerging from the blur like a figure stepping out of a nightmare. I grabbed the rifle from its rack, my hands trembling as I stepped onto the porch, shouting into the gale, "Hey, over here! You need help?" The figure didn't respond, its pace steady and unhurried, cloaked in a tattered coat that flapped like broken wings against the wind. As it drew closer, 20 feet, then 10, I saw the face, gaunt and hollow-cheeked, eyes sunken and gray as the ice itself, skin pale and smooth without the telltale red blotches of frostbite. No shiver shook its frame, no breath clouded the air despite the -30 chill that clawed at my own lungs. My pulse raced, a drumbeat of unease. This wasn't a lost hiker or a stranded trapper. The air grew thick, heavy with a pressure like something unseen watching from the shadows, and I noticed its hands, long, bony fingers trailing the snow without leaving a single track, as if it floated just above the surface. "Who are you?" I demanded, raising the rifle, my voice cracking against the storm's roar. It stopped, tilting its head at an odd angle, and a low hum emanated from it, a sound that vibrated through the frozen ground and into my boots. The hum wasn't human. It was more like a chorus of wind chimes warped by despair, a melody that twisted in my ears and sent a shiver down my spine. I backed toward the door, heart pounding against my ribs when it spoke. The river remembers. Its voice was a rasp, cutting through the gale like a blade, and then it pointed a skeletal finger toward the creek. I followed its gaze, squinting through the snow, and spotted a glint beneath the ice, a metallic object half buried, pulsing faintly with an eerie green light that seemed to pulse in time with the hum. Instinct screamed to retreat, to barricade myself inside and wait out the storm, but curiosity pinned me in place, a moth drawn to a flame. I radioed base, my gloved fingers fumbling with the dials, but the signal died mid-call, replaced by a hiss that felt alive with malice. The figure began to fade, its form dissolving into snowflakes that swirled back into the blizzard, leaving only that hum echoing in my skull like a persistent memory. I approached the creek, chipping at the ice with an axe from the porch, my breath fogging in frantic bursts. The object was a rusted metal box, its lid sealed with strange rune-like carvings that glowed faintly as I touched it. When I pried it open, a wave of nausea hit me. A stench of decay mingling with the cold air inside was a shard of black stone, cold as death, thrumming with the same hum that now pulsed in my temples. The radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice distorted and urgent. "Get out now, it's not safe." The line went dead before I could respond. That night, the cabin shook with unseen knocks, rhythmic and insistent, moving from wall to wall like a predator testing its prey. I barricaded the door with a chair, clutching the stone shard, its pulse syncing with my heartbeat, until I couldn't tell where mine ended and its began. At 3:17 a.m., the knocks stopped, and a voice whispered through the walls, seeping into the wood. "The river claims what it's owed." I froze, the fire's warmth suddenly inadequate against the chill that settled in my bones. Dawn revealed no footprints outside, no sign of the box, just pristine snow and a river that seemed to stare back with an intelligence I couldn't comprehend. I fled to Dawson City, reporting a hallucination to the rangers to avoid sounding unhinged, but the stone's hum lingers in my dreams, a constant reminder of that night. Weeks later, I returned to the cabin with a team to investigate, armed with cameras and Geiger counters, expecting to find nothing. But the creek yielded more. Another box, identical, its stone shard glowing brighter. The hum grew louder, and the team reported sightings, shadowy figures on the ice, whispers in the wind. One night, as we documented, a member vanished, his gear left behind, untouched by the snow. The others fled, but I stayed, haunted by a need to understand. The river's edge revealed drag marks leading nowhere, and the hum now speaks in my mind. "You're next." Yukon's beauty, once a solace, now feels like a trap. Its aural dance is a veil for lurking voids, its silence a patient predator. I've lost faith in the rational, the comfort of forgetting. Every creak of ice, every shadow reminds me, the land never forgets, and its debt collectors are eternal. The letter arrived on a humid afternoon in June 2025, its edges yellowed, and its handwriting a spidery scrawl that seemed to crawl across the page, pulling me back to a past I had buried beneath layers of silence and regret. I am Clara Bennett, a violinist whose fingers once danced across strings, with a passion that filled concert halls, with a warmth that lingered in the air, but whose life had unraveled into a quiet, aching despair after my twin sister Lila vanished without a trace 5 years ago, leaving behind only a void where her laughter once echoed. In New Orleans, where the humid bayou air clung to my skin like a second shadow, scented with jasmine and the faint tang of river mud, I had settled into a life of teaching music to disinterested students in a cramped studio above a voodoo shop, the notes I played now a hollow echo of the joy we had shared as children, our twin melodies intertwining like vines. Lila's disappearance had hollowed me out, a wound that refused to heal, her absence a shadow that lingered in every corner of my shotgun house, its creaking floors a cruel mimicry of her footsteps I'd never hear again, the walls adorned with photographs where her smile faded with each passing year. The police had given up after months of dead ends, labeling it a runaway case with a shrug, but I knew her, knew the way her eyes sparkled with dreams of composing symphonies that would outlive us, knew she'd never leave without a word, her silence a scream I couldn't silence. The letter, postmarked from a town I'd never heard of, Harriston, Mississippi, bore her name in that familiar script, a plea scribbled across the page in ink that bled like tears. Clara, come to the old Grayson place. I need you. L. My heart stuttered, a mix of fragile hope and a dread that coiled in my gut, flooding my veins with a tremor I couldn't shake. And despite the warnings from friends who called it a cruel hoax or the ramblings of a grieving mind, I packed a suitcase with my violin, its case scratched from years of travel, a faded photograph of us as girls, our arms linked under a magnolia tree, and drove north, the humid bayou giving way to the dense moss-draped forests of the Mississippi Delta, where the road twisted like a serpent through cypress swamps and fields of cotton wilted under the summer sun. The Grayson estate loomed into view after hours of winding roads, a decaying southern mansion that rose from the earth like a forgotten relic, its white paint peeling in long mournful strips, its broken shutters hanging like broken wings, and its windows like empty eyes staring into the twilight that bled into the horizon. The air here carried the musty odor of rot, mingling with something sweeter, like decaying flowers left too long on a grave, and the silence was thick, oppressive, broken only by the chirp of crickets that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm, and the rustle of leaves in a breeze that felt too warm, too alive for the season. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight, like the sigh of an old soul. The interior a mausoleum of faded grandeur, chandeliers draped in cobwebs that swayed faintly as if breathed upon, portraits with faces scratched out by time or malice, their frames warped and splintered, and a grand staircase that spiraled into a darkness that swallowed the light from my flashlight. A note on the foyer table, in Lila's hand, its paper creased and stained with what might have been coffee or blood, directed me to the attic, and with each creak of the stairs, my pulse quickened, a melody of fear playing in my chest, each note a memory of her laughter, now twisted into dread. The attic was a cavern of shadows, lit by a single cracked window that cast jagged beams across trunks and dust motes that danced like spirits, and there, amid the clutter of forgotten lives, stood a phonograph, its horn gleaming with a polish that defied the grime, its brass surface cold to the touch. Beside it lay a wax cylinder, labeled Lila's song in her careful script, and when I wound the machine with trembling fingers, her voice filled the room, soft, trembling, singing a tune I'd never heard, its notes weaving a tapestry of longing and terror that wrapped around me like a shroud. The sound was warm, intimate, an echo of her presence, but as it played, the air grew cold, a chill that seeped into my bones, and whispers joined her voice, a chorus of unseen throats that murmured my name, Clara, Clara, in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, their tones a blend of sorrow and hunger. The days that followed blurred into a haze of discovery and dread, each moment stretching into eternity as I stayed in the mansion, its walls seeming to close in with every sunset. The phonograph became my anchor, its cylinder replaying that haunting melody, each night, the needle scratching across the wax like a heartbeat, and I began to notice patterns, subtle shifts in pitch, a sigh that wasn't Leela's, a faint clink that might have been chains. The whispers grew louder, seeping from the walls, their tones shifting like a tide, sometimes pleading, a child's cry for help, sometimes accusing, a judge's verdict in the dark, until I began to hear them even when the machine was silent, their voices threading through the creaks of the house, the drip of water from a leak I couldn't find. One evening, as thunder rumbled outside, its growl shaking the windows, I found a hidden panel behind the phonograph, its wood splintered as if pried open in haste, revealing a stack of letters, all from Lila, dated over the past 5 years, each more frantic, their edges worn as if handled by trembling hands. They won't let me leave, the choir holds me. Help me, Clara. My hands shook as I read, the ink smudged with what looked like tears, the paper brittle, and a photograph fell out. Lila, pale and gaunt, standing in the attic, her eyes vacant, surrounded by shadowy figures with hollow faces that seemed to leer from the glossy surface. I clutched the photo to my chest, my breath hitching, the room spinning as the whispers grew into a hum, a vibration that pulsed through the floorboards. The tension coiled tighter with each passing night, a snake wrapping around my soul. As I explored the estate, my flashlight casting long shadows that danced like specters. I played the cylinder obsessively, hoping to decipher its message, and in its loops I caught new sounds. Footsteps pacing the attic, a sigh that wasn't Lila's but deeper, more resonant, the faint clink of chains that rattled like a prisoner's lament. My sleep fractured into nightmares where I stood in the mansion, the choir surrounding me, their faces featureless, their mouths moving in a silent song that pulled at my mind, their hands reaching with fingers that dissolved into mist. During the day, I wandered the halls, finding a basement sealed with rusted locks, its air thick with the stench of mold, and something metallic, like old blood, the door resisting my efforts to pry it open. I spoke to the emptiness, my voice cracking, "Lila, where are you?" And the whispers answered, "She's ours. Join us." Their voices a chorus that vibrated through the floorboards, the walls, my very bones, a sound that felt alive, sentient, hungry. I began to see them in the corners of my vision, shadows that moved when I didn't, their forms blurring into the wallpaper's faded roses, and I wondered if the mansion itself was alive, its decay a mask for something older, something that fed on memory and music. The climax struck on the 10th night, a storm raging outside, with a fury that mirrored my unraveling mind, its lightning illuminating the attic in jagged bursts that painted the walls with fleeting, grotesque shapes. I wound the phonograph, my hands slick with sweat, and as Lila's song swelled, its notes rising like a plea, the air shimmered, the shadows coalescing into forms, tall, emaciated figures with hollow eyes that gleamed like wet stones, their mouths open in a song that pierced my ears, a sound that was both beautiful and agonizing, a melody that clawed at my sanity. They moved toward me, their steps silent, their hands reaching with fingers that trailed mist, and I felt a pull, a thread tugging at my soul, as if they sought to weave me into their harmony, to bind me to their endless choir. I grabbed my violin, its wood warm against my palm, playing a counterpoint to their tune, the strings vibrating with a desperation I'd never known, each note a cry for Lila, a defiance against the dark. For a moment the figures froze, their song faltering, their hollow eyes widening, and I saw Lila appear, her form translucent, her eyes pleading, "Run, Clara," her voice a whisper lost in the storm, before she dissolved into the choir, their voices rising to a scream that shattered the cylinder, its fragments scattering across the floor like broken dreams. The attic shook, the walls cracking, the mansion groaning as if in pain, and I fled, tripping down the stairs, my violin clutched like a lifeline, the choir's wail following me into the night, a sound that seemed to chase the lightning itself. I escaped to Harriston, my car's engine roaring over the storm, and reported Lila's letters to the sheriff, a grizzled man who squinted at me with suspicion, his office smelling of stale coffee and tobacco. He and his deputies found the mansion abandoned, the phonograph gone, the attic pristine as if my weeks there had been a dream, the letters vanished, the photograph reduced to ash in my pocket. Back in New Orleans, the melody haunts me, playing in my dreams with a clarity that defies memory. Its notes a thread I can't sever, weaving through the hum of the city, the drip of rain on my roof. I've stopped teaching, my violin silent in its case, its strings slack, but the whispers linger, soft against my window pane, asking, "Why did you leave her?" in voices that shift from Lila's to strangers, their tone a mix of sorrow and accusation. I've researched the Grayson family, finding tales of a composer who vanished in the 1800s, his music said to linger in the house, but the records end abruptly, as if erased. Was it a trap set by the choir, a remnant of some forgotten ritual tied to the land, or did Lila's music bind her to them, her compositions a key that unlocked their hunger, waiting for me to join? Each night, I wake to a new note, a summons I fear to answer, the clock ticking toward 3:17, the hour the storm broke, wondering if the Grayson estate still sings, its hollow choir awaiting its next voice, or if Lila's spirit lingers trapped, calling me back to a darkness I can't escape. The wind carried a chill that bit deeper than the autumn air should allow when I first heard the tapping against the window pane of my cottage, a sound that sliced through the quiet of my evening tea on August 15th, 2025, its rhythm insistent, like fingers clawing at the glass, pulling me from the reverie of a life half-lived. I am Eamon O'Connor, a retired lighthouse keeper, whose hands once steady on the helm of the Inishmore Light off Ireland's western coast now tremble with the weight of 68 years, and memories I'd buried beneath layers of salt and silence, my knuckles scarred from decades of wrestling with rope and rusted metal, my palms calloused from the cold iron of the beacon's machinery. In Galway, where I'd settled after 30 years of tending that solitary light, the days had grown long with a solitude that clung to me like damp wool, the scent of peat smoke from my hearth mingling with the pervasive dampness that seeped through the stone walls, staining them with moss, my nights filled with the rhythmic crash of waves I could no longer see but still felt in my bones, a pulse that echoed the heartbeat of a youth spent battling the Atlantic's wrath. My wife Siobhan had passed a decade ago, her laughter once a melody that danced through our home replaced by the relentless tick of a clock that marked time too slowly, its hands a reminder of days slipping away, and my son Declan lived in Dublin, his visits rare, reduced to perfunctory calls that carried the hum of city life, leaving me to tend a garden that withered under my care, its roses drooping like my spirits, their thorns a silent rebuke. The tapping persisted, a cadence that gnawed at my nerves, stirring a restlessness I hadn't felt since my last night at the lighthouse, and when I rose from my armchair, its cushions worn to the shape of my body, I found a parcel on my doorstep, its brown paper sodden from the mist that draped the coast, tied with twine that frayed under my fumbling fingers, the knots resisting like old secrets. Inside lay a lantern, its glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern that refracted the amber glow of a flame that flickered with an unnatural vitality, casting shadows like living things across my floor, their edges shifting as if alive, and a note in a hand I didn't recognize, the ink smudged but legible. Return to Inishmore. The light needs you. Tonight. The date, August 31, 2025, was circled in a shaky line, and though it was now 11 p.m. plus 7, as I read by the clock's dim glow, the urgency struck me like a wave crashing against the cliffs, the lantern's warmth seeping into my palms, its heat a promise or a warning. Memories flooded back of storms that battered the tower with a fury that shook its foundations, of sailors lost to the sea, their faces etched into my mind, of a night 20 years ago when the light failed, the machinery grinding to a halt, and a ship broke apart on the rocks below, its crew's screams haunting my dreams, a chorus that replayed with each thunderclap. Against the protests of my aching joints, the creak of my knees a symphony of age, I bundled into my coat, its wool threadbare but familiar, grabbed the lantern, and drove to the coast, the vehicle's headlights cutting through fog that swirled like phantoms, the road winding past fields where the moon hung low, its light swallowed by clouds that promised rain, the radio static a companion to my racing thoughts. Inishmore rose from the mist, like a sentinel carved from the earth's bones, its white tower weathered by time, its paint flaking like skin, shed by an ancient creature, the cliff beneath it jagged and slick with seaweed that glistened under the lantern's glow, the air thick with the brine of the ocean, the metallic tang of rust, and a faint sweetness that hinted at decay. The lantern's flame flared as I approached, its light dancing across the rusted door, which creaked open under my push, the hinges groaning like a voice from the deep, revealing the spiral stairs that wound into a darkness that seemed to breathe, their iron steps cold against my boots, each tread echoing with the ghosts of footsteps past. The interior smelled of oil and damp stone, the walls etched with the scratches of gulls that nested in the crevices, their cries a memory etched into the silence, and at the top, the light chamber stood silent, its lens clouded with salt, its mechanism still, the air heavy with the residue of years unlit. I lit the lantern, its glow filling the room with a warmth that clashed with the chill that seeped from the stone, and as I adjusted the wicks with hands that shook from more than cold, a sound emerged, a low hum like the drone of a distant engine, rising from the floor, vibrating through the soles of my feet, a resonance that stirred the dust into spirals. The beam flickered to life, casting a golden arc over the sea, its light piercing the fog, and in that illumination I saw them shadows moving on the water, not waves but figures, their forms indistinct, their movements synchronized, as if drawn by the light itself, their silhouettes swaying like reeds in a current I couldn't feel. The nights that followed tethered me to the lighthouse, each visit a descent into unease that deepened with every step, a ritual I couldn't escape, the lantern my unwilling guide, its flame never dimming, its heat a constant against the cold that gnawed at my bones. I returned nightly, the drive a blur of fog and memory, the cliff road slick with rain, and the hum grew into voices, a chorus that whispered names, sailors I'd known, crewmen from that lost ship, their tones pleading with a desperation that clawed at my heart, then accusing with a bitterness that stung, threading through the wind that howled through the tower, its gusts rattling the windows like a plea for release. I documented their words in a notebook, its pages yellowing under the lantern's glow, my handwriting shaky, the ink blotting with the dampness of my hands, finding patterns, dates of wrecks etched into the stone where the hum was loudest, names of the dead carved by unseen hands, a ledger of loss that spanned decades. One evening, as a storm brewed on the horizon, its clouds black as ink spilling across the sky, the lantern flared, its light intensifying, and the shadows solidified into forms on the cliff below, their faces blurred but their eyes glowing with a light that mirrored the beam, a reflection that burned into my retinas. I shouted into the gale, my voice cracking against the wind, "Who are you?" And the chorus answered, "We guard, we wait, you called us." Their voices a vibration that shook the lens, the tower trembling as if alive, its stones shifting with a groan that echoed the sea's rage. The tension spiraled, a tightening noose that choked my breath, as I delved deeper into the lighthouse's history, a journey that consumed my days and haunted my nights. I found journals in the keeper's quarters, their leather covers cracked and mildewed, yellowed pages detailing a ritual passed down through generations, lighting the lantern on the anniversary of a wreck, August 31st, to appease the sea's lost souls, a duty never recorded in official logs, its secrecy a burden borne by keepers like me. The entry spoke of voices, of shadows that climbed the cliffs, of a pact with the ocean to guard its dead, the light a tether that bound them to this world. The date, August 31st, matched the note, and as the clock neared 11 p.m. on this night, August 31st, 2025, the significance dawned, a weight that pressed on my chest, a realization that I had stumbled into a legacy I couldn't escape. I spoke to the shadows, my voice a whisper lost in the wind. I didn't call you, leave me be, but they pressed closer, their forms climbing the cliff with a grace that defied gravity, their whispers a song that burrowed into my mind, promising reunion with Siobhan if I joined them, her name a melody that tugged at my soul. My nights blurred with exhaustion, the lantern's glow my only companion, its heat burning my hands, leaving blisters that wept in the cold, and I began to see her, Siobhan's face in the beam, her smile fading into the shadows, her voice calling me to the edge, a siren's lure that I fought with every fiber. The climax erupted on August 31st, 2025, at 11 p.m. The storm at its peak, lightning splitting the sky with forks that illuminated the tower in jagged bursts, the thunder a drum roll to my doom. I stood in the light chamber, the lantern blazing with a fervor that scorched the air, its flame licking the walls, and the chorus swelled, the shadows surging up the stairs, their forms now clear, sailors in tattered uniforms, their eyes hollow, their hands reaching with fingers that dripped seawater, the air thick with the scent of salt and decay, a miasma that coated my throat. The beam intensified, pinning me in its light, a prison of gold, and Siobhan appeared, her form ethereal, her dress flowing like mist, her eyes pleading, "Aemon, come with us," her voice a melody that tugged at my heart, a sound that carried the warmth of our youth, the nights we'd spent by the fire. I stumbled back, the lantern slipping from my grasp, its flame spilling across the floor, igniting the oil-soaked rags, and the shadows closed in, their song a scream that shattered the lens, the tower shaking as if to collapse, its stones raining down like tears. I fled, the stairs a blur beneath my feet, the heat at my back, the lantern's glow fading behind me, the choir's wail chasing me into the night, the cliff edge crumbling under my boots, forcing me to leap into the fog, my landing a roll into the wet grass below. I reached Galway, my clothes singed, my hands blistered, reporting a storm incident to the Coast Guard, their faces skeptical as they noted the absence of fire, the lighthouse standing intact, the lantern gone, the lens repaired as if untouched. Back in my cottage, the hum lingers, soft against the window pane, Siobhan's voice weaving through it, asking, "Why did you run?" In a tone that carries both love and reproach, the tapping resuming with each midnight, the lantern's glow flickering in my dreams, its warmth a phantom on my skin. I've burned the journals, their ashes scattered to the wind, but the anniversary approaches, and I've researched the Inishmore light, finding tales of keepers who vanished on August 31st, their names erased from records, their fates a mystery swallowed by the sea. Was it a ritual I unknowingly invoked, a debt of the light owed to the ocean's dead, or did the sea claim Siobhan, her spirit bound to the tower, waiting for me to join her vigil? The clock ticks toward 11 p.m., and I wonder if the Inishmore light still burns, its guardians awaiting my return, their song a promise I can't escape, or if the next tap will be her hand, calling me back to a light that never fades. The stillness of my workshop fractured at 017 a.m. +7 on September 01th, 2025, when the chime of a clock I hadn't touched in years sliced through the Arctic silence, its tone a brittle intrusion that ricocheted off the frozen logs of my cabin, jolting me from a restless sleep on a cot buried under furs, tangled tools, and the detritus of uncompleted projects. The sound cutting through the icy air like a shard of glass prized from the glacier's heart, its resonance lingering like a breath held too long. I am Gideon Holt, a clockmaker whose hands once crafted timepieces that measured the endless nights of Atijvik, a remote Alaskan village perched on the edge of the Arctic Ocean where the sun vanished for months, my fingers deft at forging brass into intricate gears that whirred with life and glass into faces that glowed faintly against the polar dark, a skill that had earned me a fleeting respect among the Intupiat, but whose life had eroded into a reclusive existence after the tragedy that took my partner, Elias, 4 winters ago, his death a wound that festered in the permafrost of my soul, a loss that carved a hollow where laughter once resided. In my cabin, a weathered structure lashed by winds that howled down from the Brooks Range with a ferocity that rattled the panes. The air carried the sharp bite of frost that stung my nostrils and the faint musk of seal oil from the stove that sputtered against the cold, the days a blur of solitude that pressed against me like the ice on the horizon, an oppressive weight that mirrored the snowdrifts piling against the walls, the tick of abandoned clocks a taunting refrain that filled the silence with a rhythm of regret, my nights tormented by the memory of Elias's cry as he vanished into a crevasse during a blizzard, the crunch of snow beneath his boots, the fading echo of his voice, a loop that haunted my every breath, a sound that mingled with the wind's wail through the chalet's cracked windows, a lament that refused to fade. The village had shunned me, their murmurs blaming me for his loss, their eyes avoiding mine in the dim light of the community hall, their trade dwindling to whispers carried on the wind, leaving me to mend broken mechanisms in a workshop that had become a crypt of ticking ghosts, its walls lined with timepieces that stared with unblinking dials, their silence a judgment that echoed the isolation of the tundra. The chime emanated from the corner, where an elaborate totem clock, Elias's last endeavor, unfinished and mute since his death, its carved ivory figures, of whales and ravens frozen in mid-motion with wings that seemed to quiver in the lantern's flicker, stood shrouded in frost that glittered like tears shed by the ice, its presence a relic of our shared dreams, a monument to a partnership severed by fate. I shuffled forward, my boots crunching on the ice-crusted floor that groaned under my weight, each step a reminder of the life we'd built together. The hours spent shaping wood and metal, and found its face ajar, the wood splintered as if pried open by unseen hands, a note wedged inside, the parchment brittle as the tundra's crust, its edges curled like the petals of a frost-bitten flower, the ink a faded blue that bled into the fibers. Finish what he started. The ice waits. Midnight, September Fawn. The date matched the present hour, and though the clock's hands, encrusted with rime that sparkled in the dim light, pointed to 0107 a.m., the urgency seized me like a gust off the frozen sea, the chime lingering like a call from the void, its melody threading through the frigid air, pulling me back to Elias's voice, his passion for the clock, the night he fell, the storm that swallowed him, and the silhouette I'd glimpsed on the ice, a figure cloaked in snow, its form dissolving with the aurora's flare, a vision that had haunted my dreams since. Despite the ache in my bones, the stiffness of 58 winters settling into my frame like a second skin, I gathered my tools, screwdrivers dulled by frost, their handles polished by my palms, a magnifying lens fogged with the breath of countless inspections, and ventured into the night, the cabin's dim warmth yielding to the arctic chill that bit at my exposed cheeks, the lantern's glow casting long shadows across the snow-packed trail that wound through the village, its igloo-shaped homes dark as the polar night, the silence broken only by the crack of ice expanding in the cold and the distant bark of a sled dog carried on the wind. Utqiagvik lay hushed under the moon's ghostly light, its landscape a monochrome expanse of snow and ice that stretched to the horizon, the Arctic Ocean a black mirror fringed with floes that groaned under the pressure of the tide, the village a cluster of shadows where the wind sculpted drifts into eerie shapes that mimicked human forms, the air thick with the salt of the sea that stung my eyes and the metallic tang of frozen steel that lingered on my tongue. The workshop, a sturdy shack near the community hall where the elders once gathered, stood as I'd left it, its windows iced over with patterns that traced the cold's artistry, the interior heavy with the scent of whale blubber oil that coated the walls and the musty odor of aged wood that creaked with every shift, the walls adorned with clocks that gazed like silent sentinels, their faces reflecting the lantern's amber flicker in a mosaic of ticking stillness that seemed to pulse with life. The totem clock dominated the space, its unfinished dial a testament to Elias's artistry, its gears exposed like the ribs of a beached whale, their brass dulled by neglect, its pendulum stilled, hanging like a frozen tear that caught the light, its ivory carvings weathered by the cold, the whales and ravens etched with a detail that spoke of his love for the land. I began to work, the lantern's light dancing across the brass, revealing scratches etched by time and frostbite cracks that splintered the wood, and as I fitted a gear with shaking hands, the chime resounded again, deeper, richer, paired with a tick that wasn't my own, a rhythm that emanated from the clock's core, a heartbeat that vibrated the workbench, stirring the snow dust into halls that whirled like spirits dancing in the gloom. The hands shifted, aligning to midnight with a jerk that echoed through the shack, and in the glass I saw a reflection, not mine, but Elias's, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his final moments, his mouth open in a mute cry that seemed to carry the wind's howl, the image dissolving as the tick intensified, a drumbeat syncing with my racing pulse, a sound that filled the room with a presence I couldn't name. The months that followed chained me to the workshop, each night a plunge into an enigma that unfolded with every twist of a tool, a compulsion I couldn't resist, the chime drawing me back with a hypnotic pull that threaded through my dreams where Elias's face loomed, his hands outstretched as if to pull me into the ice, his voice a whisper lost in the wind's howl that battered the walls. I returned nightly, the trail a white blur beneath the aurora's greenish glow, the whole silhouette a constant guide against the endless dark, and the tick transformed into voices, a murmur naming villagers long gone, hunters lost to the ice during the long night, elders taken by the cold that seeped into their bones, their tones a fusion of grief that wrenched my heart with memories of Elias's warmth, and authority that stiffened my resolve with a duty I couldn't fathom, threading through the creak of the floor as the timbers shifted with the frost. the drip of melting ice from the roof that patted like a heartbeat, the rustle of furs stirred by an unseen draft that chilled my neck. I recorded their words in a ledger, its pages stiff with frost that crackled under my pen, my handwriting jagged with the tremor of my hands, the ink freezing mid-stroke into crystalline patterns, uncovering patterns, dates of vanishings etched into the clock's base with a precision that defied the elements, names carved by invisible hands into the ivory, a chronicle of loss bound to the Arctic soul, each entry a thread in a tapestry of sorrow that stretched back centuries. One night, as a blizzard raged with a ferocity that rattled the walls, its snow sealing the door like a tomb that threatened to bury me alive, the lantern blazed, its light intensifying to a blaze that scorched the air and melted the frost on the windows, and shadows emerged from the corners, their forms human yet warped, their bodies stretched like reflections in cracked ice, their limbs elongated as if pulled by the wind, their eyes aglow like the clock's hands with a light that burned into my retinas. Their movements a dance to the tick, a ritual of the forsaken that swayed with the storm's rhythm. I murmured, my voice fracturing with the weight of memory, and the cold that numbed my lips, "Elias, is that you?" And the voices replied, "We build, we wait, you must finish." Their echo shaking the tools from the bench, the hammers clanging to the floor with a metallic ring, the chisels skittering across the ice, the workshop quaking as if alive, its timbers groaning like a ship breaking apart, its walls trembling with a force that threatened to bring the roof down. The climax erupted at 017 a.m. on September 01, 2025. The blizzard at its apex, snow hammering the windows with a force that threatened to implode the glass into 1,000 shards, its roar a cacophony of nature's fury that drowned the village in white, the wind a howl that carried the voices of the lost. As I stood before the clock, its face nearly complete, the totem figures poised to animate with a life of their own, the gears aligned with a precision that felt guided by forces beyond my touch, a craftsmanship that transcended my skill. The chime swelled, a crescendo that reverberated through the timber with a power that shook the frozen ground, the shadows surging from the corners with a tide of darkness, their forms distinct, villagers in fur parkas, their faces gaunt and etched with the lines of hardship, their eyes hollow like the caverns of the ice that stretched beneath the tundra. Hands reaching with fingers that trailed frost, that glittered like diamonds, the air dense with the scent of pine carried from distant forests and decay that rose from the permafrost, a miasma that clogged my lungs with every labored gasp, a stench that spoke of graves unearthed. The hands synchronized with a click that echoed like a gunshot, the totem emerged with a lurch, its ivory whales and ravens releasing a note that pierced the storm with a clarity that cut through the wind. And Elias materialized, his form ethereal, his parka torn by the crevasse's edge, his eyes imploring with a depth that mirrored the ocean's abyss. "Finish it, Gideon." His voice an echo of our past, a sound that carried the warmth of our shared vigils by the stove's glow, the nights we'd spent crafting with the aurora as our witness, a melody that tugged at my heart with a force that threatened to unravel me. I turned the final gear, my hands quaking with the effort, the clock striking midnight with a chime that shook the workshop, the glass face mirroring a host of faces, Elias, the villagers, strangers I'd never met, their eyes a constellation of loss, the shadows shrieked, their voices a wail that shattered the remaining panes into a rain of crystal, the workshop trembling as if to disintegrate, its beams snapping with a crack that rivaled the ice, the valley's resonance thundering through the frozen plains, a sound that pursued me as I fled. The lantern's glow extinguished by the wind that tore it from my grasp, the snow blinding my escape, the cold searing my lungs with every step. The tension coiled, a serpent around my spirit that tightened with each passing day, a constriction that squeezed the breath from my lungs as I delved into the clock's heritage, a quest that devoured my waking hours and tormented my sleep with visions I couldn't banish, a journey that led me deeper into the ice's embrace. I discovered journals in a concealed nook beneath the workbench, their leather covers split and iced over like the hide of a walrus dragged from the sea, pages yellowed and fragile as the wings of a moth, recounting a covenant struck generations ago by the first settlers, crafting a clock to anchor the Arctic spirits, its chime a chain to hold them from drifting into the living world and bringing the cold with them, a responsibility Elias had inherited from his father, my mentor, a man whose hands had guided mine before age took him, his fall a rupture that fractured the bond and unleashed a hunger in the ice. The entries spoke of voices that shaped the craft with whispers in the wind, of shadows that roamed the frozen plains to observe with eyes that glowed like the northern lights, of a renewal each September 1 at midnight, a right to sustain the anchor, the clock's completion, a linchpin to their rest or their liberation, a balance that had held the village safe until Elias's death tilted the scales. The date, September 1, aligned with the note, and as the clock approached 01:07 a.m., the burden descended, a yoke I couldn't cast off, a realization that I had stumbled into a lineage I hadn't sought, my hands now tethered by Elias's unfinished legacy, my every movement watched by the spirits that lingered in the frost. I addressed the shadows, my voice splintering with the guilt of survival that gnawed at my conscience. I didn't intend to fail him. His death was the storm's doing. A twist of fate I couldn't prevent, but they drew nearer, their forms scaling the walls with a grace that defied the blizzard's wrath, their whispers a song that burrowed into my mind, offering redemption if I perfected the clock, a reunion with Elias if I yielded to their embrace, a promise that danced on the edge of my sanity. My nights dissolved into exhaustion, the lantern's heat scorching my fingers, leaving welts that bled in the cold and stained the ivory with crimson. The pain a tribute to my failure, and I began to see him, Elias's face in the glass, his hands steering mine through the gears with a gentleness I remembered, his voice coaxing me to the final cog, a melody that submerged my fears in a tide of memory, a harmony that hinted at peace at a price I couldn't yet grasp, a cost that whispered of eternity in the ice. I stumbled to the village, my clothes iced over with a crust that cracked with each movement, my hands raw and bleeding from the glass and frost. Reporting a storm collapse to the elder, a stoic woman whose gaze held a flicker of recognition that pierced my defenses, her home smelling of smoked fish that hung from the rafters and tallow that burned in a dim lamp, who listened with a stillness that hinted at ancient knowledge passed down through generations, finding the workshop unscathed, the clock silent, its face whole with the totem, still as if the night had been a mirage conjured by the ice. Back in my cabin, the tick persists, soft against the window pane, where the frost traces patterns of unseen hands. Elias's voice interlacing with it, asking, "Did you save us?" in a tone that blends hope with a censure that cuts deeper than the wind, the chime echoing with each midnight, the lantern's glow flickering in my dreams as a phantom warmth on my skin that rouses me with dread, a sensation that lingers like a promise unfulfilled. I've buried the journals in the snow beyond the village, their remnants lost to the drift that swallows all, but the anniversary looms with the inevitability of the returning sun, and I've scoured the village's oral histories, unearthing legends whispered by the elders of clockmakers who vanished on September 1st, their names erased from ledgers as if scrubbed by the wind, their fates swallowed by the Arctic's maw, murmurs of a spirit clock that binds the departed to the ice, its chime a ward against their wandering. Was it a ritual I unwittingly triggered, a debt of craftsmanship owed to the ice's lost souls who guard the tundra's secrets, or did Elias's fall sever the pact, his spirit ensnared in the crevasse, awaiting me to fulfill his task and join him in a vigil that never ends? The clock ticks toward 01:27 a.m., and I ponder if the totem will stir again with the next chime, its echo a summons I can't evade, a call that resonates in the silence, or if the next tick will be Elias's breath on my neck, drawing me back to a workshop where time loops eternally, the ice preserving a debt I can neither pay nor flee.